560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We have to get to developments with the big, beautiful bill. Not that the House Ways and Means tax bill is out, but before we do, a little bit more from Trump in Saudi Arabia yesterday, because he had a general sort of philosophical message that he delivered that was particularly directed at sort of the internationalists and the nation builders, both parties over the last several generations, and essentially the clean break that he has made with them.
The transformations have been unbelievably remarkable. Before our eyes, a new generation of leaders is transcending the ancient conflicts of tired divisions of the past and forging a future where the Middle East is defined by commerce, not chaos, where it exports technology, not terrorism, and where people of different nations, religions, and creeds are building cities together, not bombing each other out of existence. We don't want that. And it's crucial for the wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western interventionists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits like those who spent trillions and trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul, Baghdad, so many other cities. Instead, the birth of a modern Middle East has been brought by the people of the region themselves, the people that are right here, the people that have lived here all their lives, developing your own sovereign countries, pursuing your own unique visions and charting your own destinies in your own way. It's really incredible what you've done. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. They told you how to do it, but they had no idea how to do it themselves. Peace, prosperity, and progress ultimately came not from a radical rejection of your heritage, but rather from embracing your national traditions and embracing that same heritage that you love so dearly.
Those in attendance seem to enjoy that. For more on this, Ron Johnson joins us, Republican Senator from Wisconsin, of course. Senator Johnson, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Listen, I think that's brilliant. What Trump was, that message he delivered, I'm sure the military-industrial complex doesn't like hearing it. But quite honestly, this is one of the main reasons that I totally support Donald Trump. I remember when Iran knocked down a drone, and the drumbeats of war were going, got to retaliate, and right before the strike, I think President Trump finally asked the question: "So, okay, how much did that drone cost?" It was a couple $1 million. So, how many people are going to lose their lives in our retaliation? A few hundred. And he made the correct decision. That's not worth it. A $3 million drone isn't worth hundreds of lives, many of them, if not most of them, innocent. So I've always felt that he was probably the least likely president in my lifetime to drag us into another war. He's trying to extract us from wars. They're not easy to do. But those comments, I hadn't heard them until just listening right now. First of all, they are brilliant. I think they are inspiring, and that's exactly the kind of leadership that I think the world needs coming from America. We're happy to help you out. We want to engage in commerce and do it fairly, but we respect your sovereignty. We respect your cultures. You build your societies the way you want to, as long as you don't threaten us or others. Let's live and let live in peace. Again, I'm so glad I heard that, because I hadn't had time to listen to that. That is absolutely brilliant. I hope the world is inspired by what President Trump just said right there. Of course, half the world, if not more, will just utterly reject it because they came out of Trump's mouth.
Right.
Those are inspirational words he just uttered there.
And do you think that the gambles that he offered in those remarks as well, beyond that clip, but just in the remarks generally, normalizing relations with Syria, the overture to Saudi Arabia to formally recognize Israel, the time to make a decision message to Iran, those gambles are consistent and in furtherance of that vision, and they make sense?
Yes, he's seeking peace. That's it was John F. Kennedy that said the number one goal and responsibility of American president is to keep us out of war. That came from somebody who was in war and from a generation that understood how war was hell. Unfortunately, we have not heeded President Eisenhower's warning about the military-industrial complex, which I think has taken over and has driven so much. I mean, you take a look at our military interventions from Vietnam right on through, the Afghanistan, Iraq. We didn't accomplish the objectives. What's happening in Ukraine right now, it is actually solidifying the alliance between China and Russia and Iran and North Korea. That's not good. I mean, that's not accomplishing our strategic objectives here. So, I for one, am really appreciate the fact that President Trump is just charting a different course. Again, he's a disruptor, which is why so many people hate him. But he's, from my standpoint, disrupting a pretty corrupt system and something that has just led to war and misery. And there's been so much destruction. It's about time we look at peace and building things as opposed to destroying them and always looking for somebody else to be kicked off at and somebody else to go to war with.
Is there enough disruption happening on the tax and spend side here back home? We poured over your op-ed in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, and I certainly want to give you a chance to explicate that in further detail, but also wanted to get your view on the tax bill out of the House Ways and Means Committee yesterday that extends the lower tax rates from the 2017 legislation across the board and has provisions for expensing equipment purchasers and bonus depreciation for new factories and some of the other growth-oriented aspects of the 2017 bill, but also has, it's a sort of what your discussion was on the spend side. It's got a lot of other things that are sort of a hodgepodge of serving interests, not serving the larger interest of growth and American prosperity, including a sop to those blue state Republicans demanding an increase in the SALT deduction.
Yeah, I'm just asking everybody to take a look at the bigger picture here. We went on a spending spree because of COVID, an unprecedented event. Went from $4.4 trillion to $7 trillion this year, 58% increase. Population has grown a little more than 2%. It's unprecedented other than World War II, which, by the way, we went into World War II spending about 11.7% of our GDP. The federal government was spending that. Got up to 41%, but by 1948, President Truman and Congress realized that's unprecedented. We have to return to pre-war spending. We were back down to 11.4% of GDP. So it can be done. But we've gone from about 20.6 to almost 24% of GDP. Again, no family, if they had an illness, had to borrow $50,000 and spend it on medical bills. If that individual got well, they wouldn't keep borrowing $50,000 and keep spending that level. That's what we're doing. So no, we are blowing historic opportunity. There's really not overall principles and goals. It's just, as you said, just a hodgepodge of junk. It's not really designed to spur economic growth necessarily. Some of those things are. Listen, I would just extend the current tax code. I mean, if we weren't smart enough to do that in 2017, make it all permanent, we should do that now. We should provide the border funding. I need funding for defense, smart money for defense. I'm very concerned how we're going to actually spend it. But then we should have done that in a three-step process. Those things could have already been accomplished. Then we'd be getting down to the really hard part of what's a simpler or more rational tax system that raises the revenue we need. Don't do it economic and social engineering through the tax code. Just have a simple and rational tax system without expanding the deficit. And we have to get spending under control. I mean, we're going to spend $89 trillion over the next decade, at most, will save about 1.3%. This is what they're talking about right now. I mean, it's not even a rounding error. We're going to go from $37 trillion in debt to about $59 trillion. It's completely unsustainable, and most people here in Washington and around the country are just listening by the graveyard. So I'm trying to point out those macro numbers, and I'm really trying to prod the White House to kind of wake up, rethink what they've done with this one big, beautiful bill, because it's pretty ugly right now. And let's go back to a multiple-step process, take care of the things we all agree on, and let's take the time to get the taxes and the spending right.
Well, where are some areas where
have you gotten any feedback from the White House or even from your own caucus on that?
Well, let's put it this way. Nobody can disagree with what I'm saying.
So they just say nothing?
What they say is they just immediately, yeah, but that ship has already sailed. And I say, well, call that ship back to port.
Yeah.
Because the other big, beautiful bill, that's the Titanic. That's going down. Okay, there's enough of us in the Senate that are demanding spending rationality here. Okay? And I've got a great video, by the way, on my about 1:30 of Republican leaders saying, we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem.
Right.
Well, are we willing to fix it? So I'm just holding their feet to the fire. Say, listen, you've all said it's the spending, and we're all basically ignoring that.
Well, where's the first place you would cut spending?
I would do it across the board. Elon Musk has shown us how to do it. You have to do what private sector does. Go by line by line by line. Nobody's willing to do that. I proposed a budget review panel of senators, House members, members of the administration, sitting down, going line by line with the secretaries and their budget, justify every line, justify the $7,000 billion you're spending. And if you do that, my earlier proposals where you take past year's total outlays, increase them by population growth and inflation, leaving Social Security, Medicare, and interest alone, we'd be somewhere between $5.5 and $6.5 trillion versus $7 trillion. So you have to do the work. We're not doing the work. We're rushing it the same old way we always do it. Exempt most programs. Take a look at a few. Say, well, we can tweak those. That won't be so politically unpopular. We'll get a score. Clap our hands together and say, oh, look at what a great job we did. And in fact, what we're going to do is we're going to actually increase the deficit over the next 10 years. We're going to increase the debt. We're not banging the curve down. We're increasing it dramatically. We're not addressing the real problem, which is spending.
I would suspect that you have some allies within Trump's inner circle on this topic, like Russ Vought, the OMB director. I mean, and you know, that maybe there's limited things that they can do, but do you feel like you're just one voice in the wilderness, or there are other people who are pushing, and some can speak up and some have to be more careful?
No, this is my third column that ran the Wall Street Journal. It's kind of a part of a series, and it's gaining traction. And I've got a lot of people that, I agree with everything you say, but then they throw the towel in. But no, people realize, nobody's refuting what I'm saying. They'll look down at their shoes kind of guiltily if they're not willing to support it. But again, that's why I got to dig my heels. And just like I did in the 2017 tax cut, when all we were going to do is cut taxes for 5% of American businesses and C Corps, and I said, nope, not going to vote for this thing until every American business can compete on a reasonably level footing. Yeah, you also have to address the pass-through. So people know I'm serious about this. And again, I'm digging my heels in.
So what are your must-haves, even if they're sort of like general metrics on both the tax and spend side?
So I've always said it's a return to a reasonable pre-pandemic level spending, and I'm open on that, but a process to achieve it and maintain it. I come from manufacturing. You don't have a good product if you don't have a good process. We've never had a process to control spending. We don't have a balanced budget requirement. The Budget Act didn't do it. Simpson-Bowles didn't do it. The Budget Control Act didn't do it. So what I'm suggesting is what DOGE has done. Line by line review, expose all this spending to the public. Again, I literally think you could go through the $7,000 billion we spend, probably hundreds of billions of dollars that if you said, we're not going to spend it, nobody would notice it. Nobody would notice it.
And it's, and one of the arguments, like path of least resistance argument, says, well, we, like you said, the ship has said, we don't have time. We got to get this done before the summer recess and so on and so forth. Is there any reason if you got an audience with Trump on this and he decided Senator Johnson is making sense, we should choose the path that he is charting for us, that this couldn't get done within the same time horizon?
Well, first of all, I've had a couple of audiences with him with the Budget Committee and Finance Committee. I've shown him my data. He said, I love this. The House ought to love this. But then, well, it's not his staff or anybody else just not following through because, listen, cutting spending is hard.
Yeah.
There's a constituency for every dollar. So you take the path of least resistance. I mean, Trump, Trump. I mean, the guy's brilliant. Look at what, again, I'm just singing his praises from what he said. So he's paints in broad strokes. So he loves the concept of one big, beautiful bill. I just hate to say he was just wrong. We should have done this multiple steps, border funding defense, extend current tax law, take a massive automatic tax increase, which was a mistake of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. Okay, correct that mistake by just extending current tax law, then take the time. Take the time to get a rational and simple tax system in place. And we need to debate these things. I love the fact he's focusing on working men and women in this country, but I'll take a look at some of these things. No tax on some overtime. That'll be an accounting nightmare. Plus, I think people have enough incentive of getting time and a half or double time for their overtime. I don't think that's necessarily a smart thing to do. Plus, it's going to encourage public sector unions who refuse to go to 4 shifts on continuous shift operation. It increases the cost. It's hard on them, but they like the overtime pay. So again, when you micromanage the economy to that extent, you just screw things up. So I'm not a supporter of, for example, no tax on overtime. I think that's not a good idea. I'd like to have time to debate that rather than just shove it in because President Trump said so. So,
but just to be clear from your op-ed, right now in terms of what is currently constituting the big beautiful bill, you say that doesn't have the votes in the Senate.
Again, you never know what happens when you're right down to crunch time, which is why they package this stuff up. Oh, you're going to vote to allow the government to default?
Yeah,
you're going to vote to make sure. Okay, that's why they package a few kind of must-haves into a bunch of crap to force you to vote for it. Which is, by the way, why we're at $37 trillion in debt. That's how this has worked. This is why we're at $37 trillion in debt. It's time to start busting that up. Let's start focusing on smaller bills that accomplish individual objectives that we all agree on, and take the time on the more controversial things where we need time to analyze it, to debate it, to look at each one of these proposals and go, that's really not a very good idea, or that's a great idea. But we need the time to do it. We're not taking the time. It's going to be shoved down people's throats. And right now, because we're not addressing spending, not even close, I'm just saying I'm no.
He is Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson. Senator Johnson, thanks as always. Appreciate your time.
Have a great day.
You too, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Patrick was way behind on his IRS